one of the most useful sayings I've ever heard, René, and it's astonishing because it came from somebody in HR. But in the absence of predictability and precision, you need flexibility and resilience. You can put a lot of your money into improving your predictability and precision, drilling. So instead of saying, no, we'll live with that and deal with it the moment we face it.
Yeah.
So that's flexibility and resilience.
Right,
and technology really helps you. Now, you come along with your blast hole rig, it's telling you instantaneously what the best location is. So you have the flexibility in your system and absorptive capacity. You can do that. But without technology, it's very hard. But people get stuck in that role, particularly geologists and academics.
Yeah.
You ask an academic what they want to do, they'll just say, oh, we need more data, more research.
More data,
that's the default, rather than reduce
need to drill
risk.
More holes.
Yeah, so risk is a difference.
Yeah.
You can either lift this down amount of data or information you need, or you have, or reduce this data, information, or knowledge that you need. So so just make things simpler.
I first connected with Stuart Masters through both of our work on JORC. I never really run into Stuart before, and when I looked him up on LinkedIn, the first thing I noticed is that he's got a bizarre range of education under his belt. Stuart's got degrees in geology and geophysics, computer science, geostatistics from Fontainebleau, an MBA and a master's in business analytics. How do these people find the time? Besides that, he's got more war stories about trips around the globe than anyone else I've had the pleasure of talking with, and it was hard for me to stay on track and not get distracted by our mutual passion for good music and stories about being chased by bears somewhere in Russia. Stuart and I cover a fair bit of ground here, starting off with some good discussion on the process of audits. He does a lot of work in this space, and I hope you get something out of that part of the conversation, as it's not something I've talked about before on this channel. We cover the reason of his decision to join JORC and his thoughts on the various areas that he feels are important to make changes to and why. And I do poke around a bit in the area of competence from a JORC perspective, but wanting to focus on both the good and the bad, I enjoyed listening to his thoughts on the best projects he's ever worked on as well, and what made them so great. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. This was really fun, and I'm already secretly planning to get Stuart back for a full episode on war stories only. And as usual, if I've left anything on the table, then please let me know in the comments so we may come back to this in a future discussion. Let's get into it. G'day, Stuart. How are you going?
Very good. Yourself, René?
Yeah, very good. Sorry to make it all so difficult to connect, but that must mean we've got the most spectacular discussion ahead of us, right? Because
Yes. Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Now, look, I really appreciate your patience, mate. I mean, all this IT stuff, and it's all still new to us. We're still only 12 chats in or something, so really appreciate you making the time. And another chat I've been really looking forward to have, and for the viewers out there, I only sort of sideways connected with you through JORC, and I'm not as deeply entrenched in JORC and the work that you've done over many years there, and I don't really want to steer too much in JORC land because I'll see dribble coming out of corners of mouths pretty quickly and boredom will overtake us. But there are some interesting aspects that we might walk into, but other than a similar passion for music, I thought, as geologists and resource geologists, I thought, look, I've obviously heard so many stories that we were just talking about one, been laterally involved with, and I thought, let's have a conversation because I'm sure you got war stories that will outdo Brett's one from the other day. So.
Yes, they're probably not for a family exposure. Anyway, you can edit it later.
Well, it's funny, actually. I get the most feedback on people just listening to people that have had these awesome stories, right? It's not all about, hey, tell me about that bloody variance or this JORC thing, or, how does a resource work? It's really, a lot of people just listening to other geologists or other professionals in the industry and their views on things and their experiences. Yeah, like I joked, just really exciting to talk about a geologist out in the field and realizing that you've both been in Eritrea and a few stories come out. So, and I've got no idea where this will go, but I thought I'd give you a ring, man, and have a chat. So your background, I think you went to Fontainebleau, right? So you're a geostatistician, resource geologist. Would you call yourself more of a geologist or a geostatistician, or is it already immediately making it tricky?
Sort of neither. I did geology and geophysics to start with at Melbourne Uni. Then, after a few years, I did a computing graduate diploma on the side.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, nested into that, I went across to Fontainebleau and did geostats. Then I came back and finished off computing.
Yeah.
And then, 10 years later, did an exec MBA. Then about 10 years later than that, did a Master of Business Analytics. So I often get asked, like from my daughters, "What do you do, Dad?" And I say, "Actually, I'm not quite sure." But resource geology. I rarely do the resource modelling these days, but it's more audits, reviews. About a third of my time on mergers and acquisitions type stuff, operational improvement, and some technological development type stuff. I know you spoke with Mike a few sessions ago. I was managing that project Mike was alluding to. So on behalf of another client. So I've got quite an interest in that in the future of resource geology.
Yeah. Well, it's such a interesting. Sorry.
And particularly the interpretational aspects, because that's the hardest part.
Absolutely, and yeah, I like what you just described, because I when I get asked what do you do, I it depends a bit where I am and who I'm talking to, what answer I give. I mean, the easiest is I'm a geologist, but last time I looked at a rock is a while ago.
I'm not a very good geologist. That's why we're Brett and June, because Brett is a superb geologist. He can look at a bit of core and talk for hours on it. Has it got speckly stuff or not?
Look, and I really did enjoy it, and I did offer him, and if he's watching, I did offer him to carry his hammer for him at some point. So it is, it is truly an interesting, discipline, and I mean, and it's working together in those teams that make all of this work, right? Because I think the post that we were just talking about, June put out this morning, incidentally, as sort of talking about that joint aspect of the work. He calls it the A-team, so that's obviously quite flattering. And what makes an A-team? Because what's obviously there's a lot of experience. You say, I mean, Brett together with June, together with somebody like yourself, and obviously the business experience that you talked about and that analytical experience. You'd be a pretty lethal team if you go to a site like that.
Yes. We're all good at what we do, very good at what we do, without boasting, but we're passionate and dispassionate. You've got to be dispassionate. So once you realise your argument's wrong, you drop it. And June and Brett are very good like that.
Right.
Okay. And the best exploration geologists are like that.
Right.
They're very passionate. They pursue their idea. Then the moment they see it's wrong, they drop it.
Yeah.
Not many of them do that, though.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I mean, you have got to convince them that they're wrong, right? Because I know June is picking and this is not to sort of pick in that space too much, but he's obviously, I mean, I wouldn't say trying to be but he's finding controversial spaces, because that's where the solution. These people are driving innovation, right? By trying to challenge the status quo, and it is difficult, because I know of a couple of subjects where it's definitely challenging the status quo.
I think he's a magnet for that type of stuff. I don't know if he deliberately seeks it out, but he's good. So that's what I like about him. He just sees things from a different perspective. And jokingly, June will probably kill me for saying this, but his approach is, "Hi, I'm June Cowan, and you're wrong."
Yeah.
Tell you why, and he's always got a good logic to it. It's not personal or something. I think that's the thing with June and Brett. It's not personal. It's okay.
How do you do? I mean, that's great, but then you've got clients, and clients are sometimes sensitive, in either how you present information to a team or at the board level and so on. I mean, take the project that you talked about. I mean, maybe something else. How do you present something that goes truly against the standing convention there? Have you come into what sort of your experiences?
Not with June and Brett. I mean, we've only done
no with clients together.
Yes, well, it's very hard to. Well, it depends. If you're talking to somebody like a technocrat, they're generally easy to convince with logic. But if you're not talking to a non-technical person, no, you can't change somebody's mind through logic and science, whatever.
Yeah.
Often, even though they might be scientific, you've got to tap into their emotion and understand what's driving them. It's like if you're ever dealing with a mid to large size company, always ask yourself, what does the client's boss want to see?
Yeah.
Because they won't admit it, but that's what they've got in the back of their mind that's driving what they're doing. And then if I can extend that now without insulting any really large companies, often if you do a review or an audit for a really large company, They just want to do it to tick something off.
Yeah.
Whereas the smaller and the mid-size, no, they actually want to learn something from it, which is partly the reason why I focus on those sides, because they value your work. Whereas the bigger ones, I mean, they appreciate it. I love the Rios and BHPs; they're all great companies or whatever. But yes, it gets lost.
Right. Because I do a bit of auditing work, and I definitely sense the difference between companies who, I mean, there aren't many who just want to box tick, because I don't really fundamentally believe that's what anybody's target there is. Although sometimes, the higher levels are involved, it might get a little bit more grey in terms of what they really want out of it. But is it truly that finding improvements, and are they really getting you out there to find those improvements? And do you probably have some sort of eyeballing exercise at the start to what you're expected to do and what you really want to be doing, right? Because you can probably find 100 things and keep talking about it. Where do you draw the line?
Well, all of my clients will know I'm pretty bloody pain in the butt when it comes to scoping, because I spend a lot of time to understand what they actually need and what they want, because often they won't know. They'll just say, we need an audit. So, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly.
It just goes on and on and on. And then, so we finally nutted it out. I did a job for a large company about 10 years ago, and they sent me a 46-page scope of work. And I said, I don't know what you need. I don't know what you want. Neither do we. Yeah. So I condensed it into a page, which in my early days in Rio Tinto, you're just forced to condense your proposal into a page, which is a great idea. And they said, yeah, that's what we want.
Right.
Yeah. So
so maybe, sorry to drill down on that audit thing, but I do find it interesting that if you go to the financial industry or various other business-related industries with your MBA hat on, there are ISO standards on auditing.
Yes.
And here you come into this industry and people say, I want an audit. And let's just, like you said, what does that mean to you? Do you want me to write a report and say, I've been here and I've looked at stuff? And I've got a few recommendations. Do you want me to apply some sort of standard? Do you want me to send a signed letter to the board? What is the purpose of this audit? And it's not clear in our industry, I find. You've probably done 100 more of these than I have, but...
Yeah, I use the accounting definition. An audit is, did you say what you said you were going to do? Even if it could be a really dumb idea, I said what I did, whereas a review is, what did you plan to do? And is that sensible? You can actually fail one and pass the other and still do a crap job. So you got to do audit and review. And then particularly like with the accounting one, you get like a qualified audit, which is sort of half a tick.
Right. I love half a tick.
Yes. Yeah, but just the difference between review and audit is not appreciated in our industry.
Exactly.
Understood. And then, as you know, one of my beefs with JORC, if we may delve into that, about the auditing, has this been audited?
Yeah.
What are the results? At best, the result is yes, it's been audited.
Yes. Isn't that the last one? It's the last one in Table 1, Section 3, isn't it? Yeah. That's
yes.
Yeah.
So you can get away with a lot in there, but
yeah. Well, it is, because I mean, it doesn't really say was it a review or an audit and what came out. I mean, in a company in WA that has recently been used in some arguments about improvements in JORC space and competence space, had an audit done on their deposit with a consultant of 3 letters and stature and so on. And it really gets quite murky in terms of what they've done, because if that's my name there, I said, hold on, folks, that was a review. Don't drag me into this stuff.
Yes. So we need that clarity, and particularly the scope of the audit and the review, because you can say, well, let's say RSE come in and thoroughly audited the sampling preparation. Yeah. Well, so what if the mistake was somewhere else in the assaying? That's beyond the scope. But the reader doesn't understand that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, no, that's audits. I do find them, fun to do, because it's sort of, you're in, it's full on, it's 9 days. I'm leaving on Sunday, actually. This is like literally the last work day before I hit the road and go and do one pretty significant one. I'm always quite amped up for it, so interested to speak and hear others' opinions. But it's full on, it's 9 days, and then there's the report writing. I think I can do, I talked to some other people about it. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit. We love the work, but we can certainly do without the report writing. Are you, after all these years of being yeoman, not completely done with it, or the report writing?
That's the one thing I consistently underestimate, how long it takes to write the report. Only because I think it's partly because I'm getting more efficient at actually doing the analysis and everything. So I end up doing more. Then by the time you come to report it and to present it, and I'm quite a stickler in the wording and everything because loose slips can sink ships. And as Steve Hunt and I appreciate, the difference between the word cautious and conservative can be very, very, very important.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
So so I'm a bit of a stickler like that. But I'm envy you having 9 days. I do a lot of due diligence work, and you normally get about 1.5 days.
Yeah,
you
look,
visit somewhere, and it's what I find is interesting is, you can argue for months over the cost of a pencil.
Yeah,
and yet multi-billion-dollar decisions are based on 1.5 days' work of a team.
No, you're not wrong. And I find that when an audit proposal goes out or when the inquiry comes through, then I ask for, I can tell you how long I'd like to spend on site, but in a day and a half, I'm only going to wave my arms at a few things and not being able to actually poke into anything. And that really, when it comes through what they really want, is it truly a deep review, or is it just some, a bit of a page about, this is sort of all right. No fatal flaws.
Well, in that case, it's more of for due diligence work. It's looking for the fatal flaws. The last 2 I've done. One's been in the very bottom of South America, and then like the very top of Canada. So by the time you fly over there, just so you might have a few beers and wines on the way. You get to site bleary, jet lagged. A day and a half later, you're back off, and I say, well, should we invest or not?
Look, that's sure, go for it. Where do I not sign? Yes, it's
yes.
Hey, well, you just mentioned Steve. Why, with all the stuff that you've then got on, why so many years on JORC? What inspired you to say, I'll do some of that? I mean, nobody in the right mind. I mean, I'm saying this jokingly, obviously, but there's a lot of heavy lifting that you do. It's volunteer work. It doesn't really get put out there, no fame or fortune. So there's clearly some sort of altruistic perspective to this, right? Or some sort of giving back to the industry. Where's it from you coming from?
I think I joined JORC the same time Pink Floyd came out with Momentary Lapse of Reason.
Oh, Jesus. That's now you're showing.
Steve Sugden, who I used to work with, well, we're associates. He was 2014, was it? AIG said, we've got a vacancy coming up. Would you like to jump on? I said, okay. Thinking this will be easy. Won't be much to do. So I started in 2014. That was the first term to 2018. And then about 2018, we started talking about the update. And that's when it got really intense. And I thought, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it properly. And Steve, the rest of the executive, are fully committed to that. I hadn't been through it before. I came in just at the end of the previous one, but they told all the war stories about the previous one. So let's not try and repeat that exercise, please. So we probably ended up with just as much stress, but a different type of stress.
Well, you did. You put a lot of work in, and I talk about the whys specifically around JORC quite a lot. I mean, for me, it was trying to understand what the framework was in which I operate as a consultant, and in which my business operates as a consultant. So it was as much a learning experience as it is trying to figure out the boundaries. Because I promise not to go into this too much, but as much as we all like to argue that the JORC code is clear, there's plenty of grayness in places, or confusion, or a mix of both, which is probably part of the reason why we need to keep updating it and adjusting it. And I got involved, not to the degree where you have, but perhaps in more of a sideline way to try and understand. Have you sort of have had that same sort of thing happening, or you already came to this JORC space like completely, like I'll sort this out, or did you learn something that you then ended up changing your approaches and so on?
Oh, no, definitely learned a lot in that process, but also some education I've been doing on the side. An alt MBA, it's called, but it's interesting. The provider of that says, start with 2 fundamental questions. What's it for and who's it for? And this not just JORC, any project. Get to those first and keep grilling your client or whatever. Colleagues until you get to the bottom of that. And we've struggled with this in JORC, because when you ask what's it for and who's it for, there's lots of different opinions.
That's pretty fair to say. And once you can't explain that, it becomes So arguably, what's it for? Let's say
as a previous boss of Steve and I said, it's there to protect investors against people like us.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. And I think the update will be a better space, but we can leave that for what it is. But well, maybe just stepping into that discussion that it sort of led to as well, that competence space, right? And I don't want to really make that too complicated, but one thing that I'm struggling with personally is to me, that whole concept around competence isn't as simple as it is. And the way I describe it, and it's really that last session that we had in Perth around discussing competence, where a few people spoke, and I thought, that makes sense. And it sort of moved me along the line. And I'll try and explain and see if I can get your thoughts on that. I mean, I understand that ASIC has its views on what goes wrong and why it goes wrong sometimes, but they're not technical people. And for them to analyze and present to us a statement of fact that the competent person should be lynched because of this project failing, and now obviously oversimplifying it, is a step too far for me, because the analogy for the plane crash for me, the plane is down, it's crashed, we all agree on that. There's an observation that people lost money, I'm fine with that. But to shoot the pilot without further questioning, I find that a dumb thing. And we have no incident investigation. I was talking to Deb Lord about this a couple of days, and that conversation hasn't come out yet. And I put it to her as well. So what should we learn more from these incident investigations? And well, we're not even doing them, right? Because we're all still kind of staring in this foggy mist of a train wreck or a plane crash. Should we maybe have a system where there is a collaborative effort if things don't go wrong, where there must be a due process that shows people what's going wrong without obviously the legal, and I don't know how this works because I'm just a dumb geologist, but where there is some process of reviewing what has happened, so that it's not the bloody variogram that caused that to fail, right? I don't believe it was just the resource geologist in that space. It's a layering, it's the board, it's the company, it's management, it's all sorts of decisions, it's politics. Sorry, that's a bit of a sort of complex way to throw you in there, but if I put that out there, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the idea, like from the ASICs, ultimately they want something to tick off. I think that, sorry, yeah, they want something to tick off, but and they're non-technical people, so they probably don't understand the uncertainty, even though we talk about measured, indicated, inferred, they're just terms at the end of the day to them. So they don't fully quite get that. But more to your point about learning, I actually did my thesis from the exec MBA on organizational learning or non-learning. And that links right back to reconciliation. Yeah. And we can put that in the same context here. A lot of people think reconciliation is about a post-mortem, explaining past performance. Yes, by all means, that's really powerful, but it's about improving future performance.
That's QC.
Learning.
Yeah.
And I go to so many different mines now. I've just come back from one. They do magnificent stope reconciliations. And then they go and make the same design and operating errors again. And you think, well, you're not learning. Yeah, but we're explaining the past performance, but you're not learning. Yeah, and so we can apply that to this as well. Okay, here was a major problem. Something went bottom up.
Yeah.
Let's go and learn from it. But you shouldn't just learn from those that do go bottom up.
Yeah.
There's a lot of what might come near the surface as well you never know about as well. So, yeah, how we do that in a way that, basically lawyers will let us do it and share that information and get those into
well, do we want that, or do we want to take some control ourselves, right? Because I was talking to Deb about, look, I got my little treasure trove of quote unquote train wrecks, and I haven't got the foggiest in terms of what actually happened, but I try to find the people that are or were involved with that and just have a conversation, and just to understand, for my own personal learning experience, to get them to share, like, hey, you were on the ground there during those 2 years. Was it really was it really that resource model, or was there a bit of this and a bit of that? And it's interesting what you hear. So I'm a little bit on the back foot, and I started off in this space like, look, they say there's a problem, so we have a problem that we must now fix. But I keep talking about overcorrection, and that is something that I'm personally a little bit worried about, specifically because we just don't have any visibility. And like you said, we're not improving our business very well, which is ironic, right? Because we talk so much at QA and QC and reconciliation, and we don't actually really do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting there. So I just sort of lost the thought I had. I actually had a useful thought there, René, it's called retrospective coherence. This is something that also came at my EMBA. It's comes from exploration geologists explaining how they found something. They all backwrite the story about how they found it. Yet about 50% of the time, they tripped over it, but they were curious enough.
Yeah.
But you get that with all sorts of investigations. It's retrospective coherence because everybody's trying to cover their butt. Despite everybody doing a good job, yes, mistakes were made. So yeah, this concept of retrospective coherence, you'll never find in technical reports, that type of thing. So we need some mechanism where we can talk openly about that. It's like you say, you just go and talk to the person who's involved at the time. So, no, this is what actually happened. It's like when you're on a due diligence, you can do all the pre-reading all you want. So when you get to site and they say, no, we don't do it that way because, so it's very, very important. And that's the one issue I have with one of the issues I have with technology, particularly like due diligence, because we've actually done a few remotely in the last few years. It's just not the same. You've got to get there, talk to the person for a day and a half. You've established that rapport, and you're picking up whether somebody's genuine or not pretty easily when it's face to face. It's much harder like this. I mean, you look quite like a believable, trustworthy person.
A decent guy, He'll be all right.
So I don't think we're ever going to get around that. You've just got to go and meet the people for a few days.
Well, and you obviously have got a lot of experience in going to these sites, and I was going to come back to that MBA degree and this organizational work, because I mean, one of the reasons I started RSE or these years ago, I didn't want to get into politics of companies and big companies and layering. Oh God, I can do without it. And I do find that when you go to a site, you're there for a short time. So, and it's not just the technical stuff. What you will probably see is that half of it isn't necessarily how people take the sample or how people estimate the block or what geostatistical tool they use. There is probably a cultural underpinning factor to success that is just as important to pick up in an audit. And that's why I came back to the ISO sort of documents, because in proper financial, they talk about this stuff. It's not just because we know when we go to a site and you do a proper audit, you need to look at the standard operating procedures to actually know what it is they say they're doing, so you can check it against something. Because if they don't have it, then I'm coming there and I say, look, I don't know what you're doing. I can watch you, but I got other stuff to do. So if I have an SOP, I can prepare and I can read and I can check and I can tick. And anyway, but the point is, if you can't see that entire fabric and you come to site, you can tick the box of yes, they are doing their wireframing properly. But do you make a point when you see some deeper fundamental problems with the culture? And I'd probably venture a guess that you probably see that quite regularly. And it doesn't have to be all broken, right? So I don't want to keep playing the disaster train story, but you would probably recognize, hey, look, there's an amazing amount of passion and energy going on here, but there's a couple of things why this isn't working. Is not for lack of trying, but there's really a few people not really maneuvering in the right place. Let's choose my words carefully. Do you raise that, or do you just look, that's beyond me now, I'm just gonna write my report and go away? Do you feel the urge to tell them that at the high level? I mean, I have that sometimes, but I'm trying to get rid of it.
20 years ago, no, we'll just put the technical stuff up the front and maybe a few lines there. These days, no, that's up the front, or if it's not in the report, it's straight to the CEO. Saying, that's all, you can do all of that, but and you get this, if I can bring it right down to the micro, with things like QA quality, for example, just quality. You go through the culture, most companies don't have KPIs aligned to quality. It's all about quantity of data and whatnot, and you say, well, just think of the culture that delivers. As I think it's Warren Buffett says, show me the KPIs and I'll show you the behavior. And so many companies don't have quality KPIs for their geologists, and not just geologists, anywhere. So you know what's going to happen then, don't you? It's just going to be quantity.
Well, I know, and I spoke to a driller about this concept because I try to get quality clauses into drilling contracts and into lab contracts, and obviously I'm not making friends with that. Actually, to the degree where one drilling company abused the crap out of me on the phone because I obviously, as a geologist, have no idea what I'm talking about with drilling. So, and he's probably a little bit right, but I was absolutely going nowhere with it because, like you said, I mean, in a service, particularly a lab, right? Most lab contracts, even in the bigger companies, or it's just turnaround time and a couple of waffle lines around, quality. We need quality ... whatever the hell that means. There is no quantification of accuracy, statistical significance, testing that you use to test that. None of it. And same with drilling. Yes, we want good quality samples. Okay. What do you do when they get wet? Bizarre how we deal with that as an industry then if you go and audit that, right?
Yes, or even I look at it more involved with like the interpretational aspects, or the geologist will hand across a database. So, well, now you got to hand across a validated database, not just a database. You've actually got to put your genitals on the block. Let's be gender neutral. And say, but same as an interpretation. No, that is my interpretation. So I get quite fastidious about this. Now you look after your data, you guarantee your data integrity and your interpretation. It's yours. The people on site need to take an ownership of that. They know the geology much better than anyone else. I don't like this model where they hand data across to somebody who does the modeling, who's never been to site, and on it goes. So, no, you know the most about it, and you should be accountable for it.
Yeah, look, you're right. I mean, I've got a slide in that on a course. I call it Full Circle. And regardless how big the company is, you should be able to have people on the rig dealing with the interps, and for that to go, and not just a database geologist to look at the QC data, etc. And I think we all agreed that, but we're at risk of diving into this everything is wrong sort of thing. I mean, it is amazing, obviously, to see those gigantic, complex organizations that obviously, they have to change with the investment climate, with commodity prices that are up and down, with goalposts that are constantly changing, throw in a bit of COVID and increase prices of petrol and diesel. And God, I mean, it's pretty amazing that stuff comes out of the ground, especially considering that nobody wants us to get it out of the ground anymore, right? So these days with the pressures that we have from an ESG perspective and so on. So I find the biggest, and this is not a question, I guess it's just, I'm just thinking about this as we speak, but the gigantic machine of all of this stuff, it seems to just plunge forward and stuff comes out, and sometimes, a couple of things go wrong. But from all accounts, I feel we're getting a bad rap because not a lot goes wrong. I feel, you can argue about some small things, but pretty amazing to see some of these operations actually do what they do at the cutoff grades in the locations where they are.
Yes, the mining from the outside it's perceived as basically quarry and we dig stuff up, but it's an extremely complex industry. I mean, how many other industries? We don't have a choice where our asset is. Well, you can take it or leave it, but your asset, it forces you to deal with environmental and social issues. You can't be like a Nike making your shoes in Thailand, so we're having problems there, let's go and make them in Vietnam. You just can't move your ore body. So you're actually forced to deal with those issues. And that's where mining's we're doing very well. Because other than being on the JORC committee, I was also on Crisco for a while, as you may know, and on their ESG subcommittee. And that was absolutely fascinating. It's a dog's breakfast. It's starting to come together, but you just realise how complex mining is.
Do you agree with Bruce saying that 50% of these big mines will never come out of the ground? I don't know if you saw the talk, but it was pretty bold statement.
I've seen that before. I say, well, if the size of the prize is there and the demand is there, they'll find a way in general. I mean, you just look at mine. Look at Grasberg, for example. The copper deposit 4 kilometres in the sky, Red Dog, all these things. A lot of these things are just engineering issues at the end of the day. As long as you deal with those, the technical and engineering issues, well,
I mean, the point was really the ESG, but I mean, I looked at a project in New Zealand not too long ago that I use as an example, but it's sitting in a park, and I don't see the political environment changing. And if we then look at RPEE and the word eventual, I mean, maybe eventually in 100 years it will come out. But, right now or for the next foreseeable future, there's only one way we're going, and that's get that stuff out of here. I mean, we just 2 weeks ago had the government proclaim no more mining, right? I mean, it is pretty one-sided. So,
it's going to be interesting. It's 15 years ago whether it sort of backs off a bit.
Yeah,
it's hard to know. Yeah,
well, pendulums, right?
The demand for minerals is going up, and you think, well, perhaps you can get them through recycling, but that's quite expensive, and ultimately it's going to come down to people have got to compromise somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's true. So. And look, I don't think we'll find all the answers, but maybe going back to what we were talking about before, let's stop talking about, quote unquote bad practice. What's the site that you've been to where you said, bam, what's the place where you've gone to, team, geology, data, where you gone, that's it, where you were so blown away that you thought, I'm going to stay here?
Okay, I'll give this company a free rap, and it's actually quite surprising, but it's Matabe in Indonesia. It's a gold mine run basically by Indonesians now. There's very few expats there, and they're just good at everything they do.
Yeah.
Things just work. And it's a surprise. I mean, 10 years ago, no, you'd go into Indonesia think, oh, dear. Let's say 15 years, but they have put a lot of effort into that, and it's been very well managed. I know the CEOs, the last 3 through there, and they've just been very fastidious about it. No, let's do things properly. And it's just one of the best. Definitely top quartile, but in terms of culture, it's great. Things just work.
So is that just top-down culturally driven, or is it just accidentally because 3 or 4 people are highly technically knowledgeable and they just have done all the right things? Or, I mean, I guess it's a combination of
both. Yeah, the technology was excellent. And the ideas, it was a Newmont or Normandy deposit very early on.
Yeah.
And eventually got taken over and run by a smaller company, but they installed some really good people.
Yeah, actually, I think Martin Jones was involved. Do you know Martin Jones? I think he was.
Yeah, I know Martin from ages ago. Long from my first job. I know Martin. Yeah, but I went there post Martin. It's apocalypse, but anyway. Yeah. Oh dear, we could talk for hours about Martin.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but they essentially said, "Now let's do things properly." And it's taken a long time, and it's come from the top. You've got to set the tone from the top, no matter what. But then you've got to have innately clever people to start with, which they've always had, and it's just purposely, endlessly come down. They just train, and it's a pleasure going up there. I was up there in June. It's my first overseas trip for about 2 years. But
oh, right. So you haven't been on the road much?
I have since then, but I think the reason it stands out is because of the development, the changes in that. 15 years ago, no, it wasn't particularly great.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just you go back every few years and think, wow, this place is just developing. Not just the mine, but like Indonesia in general. Every time you go back, you think, wow, it's just getting better and better and better. So, so that one really sticks out.
Yeah.
There's another one, Golden Grove here in Western Australia. They've do it well, but mind you, they've had a Newmont pedigree, Oxiana, MMG, EMR. Now it's part of 29 Metals. Yeah, but similar thing. They've got processes and everything right.
Yeah.
But they can do that because it's quite predictable. So you got to have you can have your processes and all you like when something is quite predictable. But when it's at earlier stages of projects, no, it's not as easy.
Well, I was talking to John Ronsky about this the other day because he worked, Western Mining Corporation for a long time, and I asked him about the special sauce of what used to be a pretty successful group, and there was all this time and money spent into allowing people to go do these PhDs, it was really focusing on technical excellence, and we see a lot of the job hopping, and there's no CV where there's more than a couple of years experience on it. So a group, do you see that in difference with groups, Masbati, do you see people stay there? I mean, it's almost a rhetorical question, but what do we do then, I guess? What is the reason why people move on so much? Is it just literally that we see so much green grass around us, and do you talk to people at that level, geologists there, like
yes, well, sorry, it's Matabe, not Masbati. The one's in the
film. Right, sorry. No, I misspoke. It was a Freudian slip. No, I did hear you right,
That's partly due to the opportunity. There's not that many other opportunities in Indonesia, and it's a great site and nice rosters and whatnot.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why they'd stay, but it's also got a very open culture. I've worked for some others where they have networks, but they do all their work on their hard drive because they don't want other people to see. And these are large companies. You think, well, what does that tell you straight away? Oh, it's faster on mine. No, it may be, but you're protecting. So you don't want to see cultures like that by any means. And you often get that in exploration groups because they don't want to give their ideas away, because that's why they're there, because they think they're rated by their individual ideas rather than the team idea.
Yeah, no, and I like going back to the culture aspect, that when you do your audits, that you're focusing on that, because I think it's a missed opportunity for managers that don't often get to see that part of their organization, because the one benefit to having folks like yourself come around, you see a lot of different places and you get a vibe, and I call it, a vibe, because you come into site and somebody proudly presents, something that they respond to courtyard with the beautiful geology on the wall, and you're in good company, right? And you want to get that feeling, and really good to bring that across to management and say, look, that part is excellent. So what if just your geostatistical stuff? I mean, you say you don't do resources anymore.
I'll do a few, but not a lot.
But not crunching. Are you staying up to date with whatever the latest and greatest is, or do you?
Yes, I stay up to it and dabble in it still, but that's not my bread and butter per se. Because from a reviewing aspect, you can anything like mathematical, you can tell the answer is in the question all of the time. It's already given. It's like, for example, let's use conditional simulation.
Yeah.
And as an auditor reviewer, you say, well, I don't care what method you use. Here's the input. I know the output you should expect.
Yeah.
If they don't match, then explain.
Yeah.
Pretty
but then you might want to dive
into the details about which technique did you use, what your assumptions, blah blah blah. But
So when you go to these sites to audit, I mean, and you obviously have got a pretty broad remit that goes all the way from data to, resource and reporting, right? So you got your JORC experience, your Crisco experience, so you got your geologists, you got the data side sorted. And do you kind of let that resource stuff sit by the wayside? Because a lot of resource geologists really focus heavily on that part of it, whilst, the domaining and the data and all that sort of process before it is as important.
Yes, probably if there's ever slight change of topic, if there's ever a problem, first thing I go to is show me your interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Big problems are normally due to interpretation rather than parameters, domain.
Sure.
Variogram parameters, this, that, and the other. Unless you've completely stuffed up your data, biased your data somehow, but interpretation. And so it's always, show me how robust your interpretation is, what your basis for interpretation is. And I always ask questions, what plausible alternative interpretations are there? And if you're at an early stage, if people say none, then you've got a problem.
But didn't we? I can't. Was it with you? We were talking about this the other day. Was it when the JORC or was some subcommittee? I don't know. But you have the box where it says, what are the other alternative interpretations, and good luck with that one, right? Because show me a geologist who's written, there are hundreds of different interpretations and mine is just going to be completely wrong, right? Hands down, all the text in there says, there might be some, but they're not going to differ much from mine. Yeah.
Yes. This links back to the talk you had with Mike.
That's right. Yeah.
And we were running. We got to the point without giving away the sponsor. We got to the point because it was rooted in risk assessment and due diligence type studies. You've got a handful of data, let's say 50 holes. What are the significantly different but plausible interpretations of these data? Once you've got a lot of data, the data conditions, it doesn't matter too much. But at an early stage, things could go this way, it could go that way. There's so many alternative and plausible interpretations. But what we get focused on, because we only really have the time is to do one, we say, okay, here's our best interpretation. So, at 50 holes, it could go that way. And there's plenty of deposits they've gone into and realised, yes, there's dikes going all through this thing, which we didn't know about.
Yeah, well, that's the example.
If you go back and look at it, you realise, had we had that in our mind, that there could be dikes through here, yes, we can see them. So it's a bit like going through old mammograms with new technology.
Yeah.
You go back and say, we could have picked that, this technology would have picked that cancer up 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was lying there in plain sight.
Yeah.
So this gets back to this whole idea of conventional wisdom, which is a very dangerous concept because people get stuck in these models of how things are. And what you find, my study, my MBA, over 50% of discoveries were somebody defying that conventional wisdom. So no, I challenge that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's obviously the whole. And yeah, I was discussing that with Mike, but that is definitely the space of the resource geologist, right? It's conventional wisdom, and there's experience, and there's your interpretation of that ore body, and the software is now starting to play a little bit of a role in quantifying that uncertainty, which there's some activity around, and I quite like that, to at least have the discussion. Not that we have the answers, and I don't know if the software packages will be press and play solutions, but there is a bit happening in that space, so let that be a good thing. I don't know if we're still creating enough resource geologists, coming into the funnel to go through that whole process, and that's obviously also a bit of a topic here. That it does take a few projects before you have a good framework of reference. So I don't know.
That sort of links back to the role of the resource geologist, or when I was first started, it was known as a computer geologist.
That's right. Yeah.
You were the computer geologist, and so often you'll see, probably not so much now, but you started off like a computer geologist, and start off sampling, please, or doing mine geology, and then work your way up. But people who just says, "Oh, I just take wireframes and data people give me, and then I do the rest." Well, they just you don't see the context. So always try and find out who your supplier is, who your customer is, and that comes back to the what's it for and who's it for, and then sort of ask that of people who are supplying what's it for and who's it for, and then go all the way across the value chain. So a lot of the technologies are helping with that, though, like in the modeling and whatnot, and as we were talking about before, who has accountability for data. There's a lot of technologies now where you're getting the data quickly, and then you can assess that straight away. So about 15 years ago, I asked many clients to say, how would your business change if you could get your data now? And of course, most say, we just do this faster. No, well, how would it fundamentally change what you do if you could get data now? Because that day is coming.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I was just talking to the Chrysos guys an hour before this, and the photon assaying and the timing component of that is going to be such a game changer in terms of availability of assay data from a grade control perspective and decision-making process. And it's going to change things, and the industry is going to keep being pushed forward. And, sometimes we get accused of not being innovative enough, but damn, there's a lot of innovation going on,
yes. Yeah. I don't want to give a plug too much, but Index have just released their blast dog, which gives you all these metrics as you're drilling down your blast holes. It's feeding into your system straight away, and you can optimize things. Because if you're in one of the most useful sayings I've ever heard, René, and it's astonishing because it came from somebody in HR. But, in the absence of predictability and precision, you need flexibility and resilience. You can put a lot of your money into improving your predictability and precision, drilling. So instead of saying, no, we'll live with that and deal with it the moment we face it. So that's flexibility and resilience. And technology really helps here. Now, you come along with your blast hole rig, it's telling you instantaneously what the best location is. So you have the flexibility in your system and absorptive capacity. You can do that, but without technology, it's very hard. But people get stuck in that role, particularly geologists and academics. You ask an academic what they want to do, they'll just say, we need more data, more research.
More data,
that's the default, rather than reduce
risk. Drill more holes.
So risk is a difference. You can either lift this down amount of data or information you need, or you have, or reduce this data, information, or knowledge that you need. So just make things simpler.
No, it's a good point. And I was talking about PXRF as well, and that was the kind of same thing, right? Because we had to submit soil samples and then wait for 6 weeks to come up with drill targets. And now you're walking around with this thing, and if you're in a base metal environment, or even in gold with some arsenic footprint, do a bit of grit, and 2 days later, you sit in camp, plot it all up, there's your targets, and you start drilling. And so that's, I like how you framed it. I haven't considered that side of it, but
the Mets have been doing that for ages. If you think process plants have always been very data rich And when you look into it, they measure everything, absolutely everything, and tweak their
the on-stream analyzers.
Yes, yeah. So it's very much like that. You're getting that here now, so you can deal with that.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I like the chronostatistics, and I've gone to a few plants and applied because you got so much data, as you say. Yeah. And then you can create a variogram of that 1 second space data, and that's pretty sexy stuff. I mean, then you can really see your cyclicity in there and some problems that they can pick up. But that doesn't really seem to be a thing that happens in many places. Do you pick that up?
A little bit. What you see now, particularly actually bringing up Matabe again, about 12 years ago, I started looking at this just in Excel the day before analytics. They were measuring like the alteration lithology of the rock types going in on a crude basis, but we had all the stats from the process plant. Once you get enough data, you can sort of reverse engineer and say, when we mix this and this, the throughput goes down, or the hardness goes up, or cost, throughput, and recovery of the three. And you could actually develop that. And I think they've developed it, some machine learning. It might have been AMC have refined it. Okay. Yeah, but it's so data rich, and it lets you tailor your input accordingly, and then that drives grade control and planning and everything else. Alternatively, if that's all too hard, you just build a plant that takes everything. And then that reduces. Then it's a quarry.
So it's a good. I mean, that sort of data overload with some good, clever algorithms that can give you so much information. And that actually, sorry, now I'm really jumping around, but now that you brought the reconciliation thing back again as well. I mean, I ran into Rex Bilferson at the Mining Geology conference, and he showed me the power of Power BI, because it's all, every mine site you go to, it's all still Excel sheets and however big these companies are, and but a little bit of clever engineering on a fairly free piece of software, you can actually create beautiful dashboard and a whole system. Have you come across those? Because what he built was quite amazing. Rex, I should get you on if you're listening, but
up until late last year, I was involved with a mid to large size company in Australia, and we developed a system of reconciliation for all their worldwide operations. And now I'm just doing that, but extended to a Perth-based but growing company, multi-commodity. Nice. And just how to make that integrated, because reconciliation is still a bit of a difficult one. People who are generating the data talk in terms that people who are really at the top don't know, don't even care about. Just is it working or not? If you're at the CEO, is it working to expectation or not? But data collection, everything is down at this level. We're worrying about operational factors and whatever. I don't care. If it's working, I don't need the explanation. Give me the baby, not the labour pains. I think somebody told me once in Canada.
I've never heard that one before.
But at the bottom, now you're concerned with the labour pains, by all means.
I thought it was really quite inventive, and I wish I would have come up with it before, because you can really completely tailor what you want to get out of it, and you can present your CEO with a simple dashboard with the three parameters, and you can give the guys on the ground, the guys and girls on the ground, all the parameters that you need to fiddle with it, and to actually learn and correct. Because, like you said, that's the missing link for all of this. If it's just Excel sheet, and it becomes a monthly reporting that such and such needs to see to tick that box, but now you can turn it into that cycle where you actually improve. But anyway, sorry, I was just drifting off topic there. But so maybe just as to close off a little bit, what's keeping you up at night in the industry? I mean, JORC codes and competency debates aside, what are the top three things that we need to wrestle with as an industry, or don't we need to wrestle with anything and just keep doing what we're doing?
Okay, well, I'm not on JORC anymore, but the ESG is coming. That's unavoidable. And just to put in like a plug for JORC, many people think JORC is there to write the code. No, we're there to interpret what investors are demanding. We don't have that much choice. We've got to reflect what investors are demanding. Point, and in ASIC regulates that. It's not saying, well, this is what you need to do. Because if we're writing that investors want something else, well, investors will go to a different exchange at the end of the day to raise money. So we're interpreters, largely interpreters. So the whole ESG space is tricky. Technology, of course, it's particularly a focus on augmenting the geologist. We're just talking about geologists now. It could be any discipline.
No, okay, go on.
That's the big future, rather than replacing them.
Yes.
as you improve these technologies, I just noticed people just become smarter.
Yeah.
Because now that is doing the work,
Yeah.
the drudgery type work they were doing before, or technologies replacing that, so you can go into higher levels. So I think the human mind can expand once you're getting that done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably one in there as well. And just the other thing I see is the whole education thing. As you know, you go back and do a review and audit. So people were making these mistakes 30 years ago. Why do we keep making these same mistakes? What's going wrong?
Yeah.
And I've heard many of your previous episodes. They all dig into that. But, the education system and whatever. It's
oh God, yeah, you can. It's a vortex. You never come out of it because I think I'm starting to realize as I'm talking to people now. I love talking about my pendulum. But this education thing, the pendulum is swinging. It doesn't matter what you do. At some point, something's going to break and it's going to swing back again. And like the skill shortage in Australia, you will fix it with immigration. You're not going to go into a bunch of schools and tell kids, "Hey, mining is cool," and then 10 years later it's fixed, right? That's not going to happen. It's going to be solved somewhere else, and by companies and entrepreneurs, or the immigration pressure will become too high. And but you're right, the education, although education is broad, obviously, because there's the aspect that you mentioned in particular is why are repeating the mistakes, and that's different. That is because all the stuff that we actually do on the ground is not the stuff that we learn at university. There's no overlap at all. No. The only thing coming from the University of Amsterdam, or the Free University as it's called, what other than understanding structure a little bit, although if I talk to the Bretts and the Junes of the world, I seriously doubt myself. But other than that, what you learn is to think outside the box and to solve problems. For 6 years long, that's what we basically, here you go to Spain, you figure this shit out. You download, no internet, you find your photography somewhere and buy some papers and see if you can find your mapping area. That we don't. Those skills, as we have been talking about, they don't always come across. So, but let's not dive into the weeds there. I think
no.
We will never get there. We better to talk about the last time you listened to The Dark Side of the Moon or something like that. But
yes, that wasn't too long ago.
Wasn't too long.
On an aeroplane, yes.
Probably on repeat every week in my house. Yes. But now, look, Stuart, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate your insights and. If there's more at some point when we get better computer control, we should do it again.
Yeah, I've got plenty of war stories, but we might have to do a family and a non-family version.
So this is interesting, and there's definitely going to be a war story one, and I think it should be a bit of a round table. I've been kicking this around, but obviously I'm in the arse end of the world here in Dunedin, and it's much more fun to actually literally sit around a table with a few beers and press record and go for 2 hours. I reckon it will be gold listening to you guys and listening to the stories.
Well, what I'll talk about is chasing a grizzly bear in a Russian chopper with drunken pilots in Siberia.
Okay, that's random. Yeah.
That's the next one. That's the hook for the next one.
That's the hook, right? I like hooks, so that's the one we'll hook in for next time. Now, awesome, man. Thanks so much for talking, and see you again, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, cheers, mate.